Och vi är tillbaka. Hej alla, det här är Lucian Vâlsan som talar direkt från Stockholm, Sverige. Som alltid är jag tillsammans med Jon Gunnarsson live från Tyskland och vår producent James Huff som sänder från USA. Greetings, Jon.
Hello there. I don't actually speak Swedish, but I actually understood what you said.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. It's pretty straightforward. Someone in the YouTube comment section asked me that a small clip with me speaking in Swedish because I avoid speaking it on camera. So consider that challenge accepted and delivered. No, you won't hear more of me speaking in Swedish on camera because it just sounds bad. Yeah. So how's been the weather on your end? At least you had some night, didn't you?
I did have some night, which was pleasant. We also had lots of sun, which it's not excessive sun, but it's like it's pretty good, pretty warm, and overall quite pleasant.
Lucky bastard. Yeah, I've been in Sweden for this is the 8th or 9th day. I barely saw the night, and it wasn't really a night. It's just late evening for about an hour, and then the sun comes back. So I've had plenty of sun, much more than it is probably healthy. Yeah, where I'm now in the northern part of Stockholm, the sun sets at around 1:30 or maybe 1 a.m., something like that, and comes back at 2:05. So, so yeah, it's a very unhealthy kind of weather. But other than that, I've had just the usual Swedish weather. That is to say, half of the day is just nice, and you say, "Oh, it's finally summer," and then it starts raining, and the temperature goes back to 3 degrees Celsius, maybe 4. And then this is pretty much what I've been bearing with for the last 10 days. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but at least it's better than if you're there in the winter where it's like the sun is like up for like 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours at best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a personal rule: no northern Ukraine, no Scandinavia between basically October and April. So, and that personal rule has served me very, very well so far. So I intend to keep it. But yeah, other than that, it's been depressing to be in Sweden. And last week, I said last week that there is a high chance that we'll be doing 2 shows from Sweden. I had to bail out from that because it was just too tiring to go in all over the places and then have the show ready in time and then actually do it. I mean, at showtime last Friday, I could barely keep my eyes open, let alone actually doing a show. So there's that. Whereas this Friday, well, I traveled last night back from Göteborg to Stockholm, but I woke up very late and got to go with the ship from one end of Stockholm to the other. Great footage soon enough on my channel. Right. I'm going to complain a lot more about Sweden later on in the show because we have several pieces of news from here. So with that said, let's dive into the news section.
Okay, the first one is from Heath Street about the UK election. Feminists despair as rumors of Philip Davies MP losing his seat turn out to be fake news. Britain's feminists were put through an emotional roller coaster, which ultimately ended in despair, as notorious anti-feminist MP Philip Davies kept his seat in Parliament. Davies, who represents Shipley in West Yorkshire and also writes a regular column for Heath Street, has become a feminist hate figure in recent years for opposing and often derailing their political aims. As the votes were being counted overnight, it was falsely reported that Davies had lost his seat to the Labour Party. This provoked paroxysms of joy from his rivals. However, when the count was actually made, Davies won. Despite an increase in Labour's share, he ultimately received more votes than ever before. Feminist Twitter was devastated. Davies's anti-feminist agenda prompted the leader of Britain's fringe Women's Equality Party to challenge him in Shipley as well. Despite the lack of support, the media lapped up the spectacle, and even US outlets covered her attempt to beat Davies. However, as Heath Street reported at the time, Sophie Walker's campaign was riven by infighting with local feminists who resented her presence. Ultimately, she came in last place with less than 2% of the vote. The humiliation even cost her £500 or $630 because of how badly she polled. Under British electoral law designed to prevent time wasting by hopeless candidates, anybody who fails to reach 5% of the total vote share forfeits a security deposit held by election officials.
Yeah. Now there is even more to this story. I remember reading it. I think it was on Exposing Feminism 2.0 at the Facebook page. Not only did the Women's Equality Party came in last in this election, but the folks that came before them, the second to last, I guess, were essentially a troll party. I mean, the president of that political party calls himself Supreme Lord Shitlord. Um, yeah, and the Women's Equality Party got 1.9% of the vote, and the party of the Supreme Shitlord got 2.7%. So it was an absolute, utter, total humiliation. I mean, you can't get lower than that. If you go below the Supreme Shitlord, you really have to be crap. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not surprised that Philip Davies won. I'm really not surprised at all. Of course, it's still good news. I mean, it could have been the utter shock of him losing, but I don't think it was possible. And also, I know, and I should have done it, and we should have done it, but no time for that. I actually know some of the women who are part of the Women for Philip Davies group that we reported on this show. A few weeks back, if you remember.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually know and even met some of them on last year at the conference, and I also have almost all of them on my Facebook friends list. And they dropped me a line and said, if you want to have us on the on your show, that would be fine and that would be great. And I said, well, yeah, can't do it because I'm busy. So yeah, but nevertheless, they did very, very good work there, and they literally went door to door and campaigned not just for Philip Davies, but also explicitly against feminism, which is probably explains why he got more votes than ever before, even as the Conservative Party in general has had a small downturn in votes, although not that big as the leftist media would have you believe.
I mean, it was a big downturn compared to the polls.
Sorry?
It was a big downturn compared to the earlier polls where they were way up on the Labour Party, and now they're just up, but compared to the Labour Party, but yeah, and of course they're far below where the polls cast them like a couple of weeks ago even.
Yeah, but still, I mean, a week before, or maybe 2 weeks, way over 2 weeks before the election, I said on my channel that the Tories will win, but it will be a regular win, not a huge landslide. And at the time, the polls still were showing a landslide. And I said, yeah, no, it's not going to be a landslide. It's going to be a win, but it's not going to be a landslide. And yeah, I was right. The Labour Party didn't actually take voters away from the Tories, or at least not in significant numbers. They took away voters from the National Socialists, the Scottish National Party, which is a socialist party. That will make them National Socialists. That is,
technically they're National Socialists.
Yeah. So that's where they've taken most of their votes. Indeed, Labour is up from the previous election, but not as a result of Tory fuck-ups, but as a result of SNP fuck-ups.
Yeah, and I mean, like the last election, it was really anomalous, where the SNP won basically everything they
could hope for.
Like almost every seat they contested, they won. That's really unusual.
Yeah, really unusual for sure. But yeah, nevertheless, the autistic screeching put forth by by the feminists was still fun to watch. Yeah, I mean, I don't get it. This pretty much shows that many feminists are really, really out of touch, not just in the world of sexual politics, with which we deal on this show, but generally with the I would go as far as to say with the common man. I mean, the audacity to even consider that maybe Women's Equality Party could actually go anywhere upwards than last, or the audacity to think that you can actually go into a deep Tory area and win just because you say, "Oh my God, the Tory is a misogynist." I mean, you really have to be seriously disconnected from reality to believe that such things can be possible.
Yeah, it's basically people who get their news from the BBC and the Guardian because these are respectable outlets, and um, that's as a result. That's the sort of filter you get when these kinds of news organizations put so much coverage on this tiny, minuscule, insignificant party. Then people who just read these media assume that, well, they must be important. So they presume that it's somehow reasonable to assume that they might have a chance.
Mhm. Yeah, fair enough. But still, I mean, come on, seriously, the Women's Equality Party. I mean, even if you were an average feminist, uh, you would still probably vote Labour because it's already a feminist party. Why the hell would you have even another one? It's pretty much the same as I mean, the Women's Equality Party in Britain is pretty much like Feministiska Initiative here in Sweden. Uh, Even many leftists don't like them because they're like, yeah, we already have feminism in all leftist parties.
Yep.
What the hell do you guys want? Yeah, it does show the amount of disconnect that there is there. And yeah, you probably do have a point with the BBC point. It's the same thing, and I've met several of these people here in Sweden, particularly in the area which is the district where most journalists and most, the bien pensants of the Swedish society live. They all live in the exact same district, which is the district where there are probably no immigrants, and 40% of the district votes for the Feminist Initiative, 40% votes for the Green Party, and the rest is divided between all the other 7 parties. The same thing. It's literally a different world. It's probably the only place, or one of the few places in Europe where being a vegan is normal. Right. Speaking of what you eat and feminism, let's go to the next one. Coming from the Evening Standard. Feminism fueled the obesity crisis, says Sadhiq Khan's head of food board. Feminist Rosie Boycott, what an appropriate name, said obesity was an unintended consequence. A food expert and advisor to Sadhiq Khan has claimed the current obesity crisis was fueled by feminism as more women swapped the kitchen for the workplace. Food policy advisor Rosie Boycott, who heads up the Mayor of London's food board, said the rise in the number of women in full-time jobs rather than in traditional housewife roles had led to a plunge in home cooking. Feminist Miss Boycott, this is just glorious, who co-founded the magazine Spare Rib at the start of the 1970s, said she felt partly responsible for the trend and said there was a lost generation of people who eat processed dinners and fast food. She told the Times, quote, "I said, don't cook, don't type, you'll get ahead. We lost it. Schools gave up cooking. Everyone gave up cooking." Miss Boycott, who is leading Sadhiq Khan's food strategy to help the capital's food system improve Londoners' health, was asked at the Hay Literary and Arts Festival if obesity was an accidental consequence of feminism. She replied, "It's certainly been fueled by the fact that women work and that we have changed things and we have allowed this huge change to happen." In December last year, the Standard revealed the NHS was spending £13 million a year on vital weight loss surgery just in London every year, with the United Kingdom having one of the highest levels of obesity in Europe. Ms. Boycott added, "Yes, on the one hand, I say everyone start cooking again, but I don't want it to be just women. I want it to be men as well." End quote. I mean, the memes write themselves these days, don't they?
What do you even say to that?
Yeah, there's nothing much to say, isn't it? Yeah, she probably has a point. Although, this, oh, everyone start cooking again, but I don't want it to be just women. I want it to, yeah, not going to happen. Deal with it. The kitchen is that way, by the way. It's just not going to happen. And I don't think there will be, at least not in Britain and Sweden and most of it. It's not going to be a new trend of everyone start cooking unless you do what they tried in Sweden, which is make shit so expensive that you're gonna have to cook at home if you don't want to go bankrupt just on spending shekels on food alone. But other than that, no, I don't think there will be another trend anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I assume even in Sweden, there's cheap sort of ready-made meals that are rather unhealthy but are really quick to cook.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess what I want to ask is, why does the city hall have a food strategy and the food department, a food board, to concern itself with what the Londoners eat? Why does such department even exist?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe next year they're going to invent the wiping your ass department because some people don't wipe properly, and that's a hygienic issue, and therefore they're going to install monitors and cameras in every stall in public restrooms to see whether people wipe properly. Maybe that's for next year.
Well, considering the high number of culturally enriching diversity in London, there is a point to be made about not wiping your ass properly. I mean, in some cultures in this world, I don't want to say Islam, but it's kind of Islam, wiping your ass with your hand is pretty common. And forgetting to wash your hands afterwards is also pretty common. So you might have tried to be satirical about it, but there is a legitimate point to be made there.
Yeah, there's also
Saying that
been there's also been a couple of German firms where toilets have been broken because some people from certain from certain Muslim countries don't really or in their countries it's not customary to have like normal toilets as we have, where you just sit down on the toilet. Instead, they have these sort of holes where you squat down, and so that what they would do is climb up onto the toilets and then squat there, and sometimes they would break. And so they had to put up signs instructing people on how to use the toilets properly and so on.
Well, in fairness, now I know that those kinds of toilets that you're talking about, back in Romania, we call it the Turkish toilets, because, well, we only saw them at the Turks. In fairness, that is a much healthier defecation position. The problem is that it's remarkably uncomfortable and and remarkably problematic, especially for older people or if you have certain health issues. So there's that. But still, having to put up instructions now, that's a new one even for me. Right. Yeah. So yeah, other than that, I don't know what to say. I mean, yeah, it is probably true, at least in part, although processed food was already on its way long before these quote unquote changes that Miss Boycott is talking about. By the way, Miss Boycott, I just love her name. These changes were in the food industry were already on their way long before the changes in the workforce. So we would have probably ended up in a very similar situation with or without the changes in the workforce, with probably slightly better results if some of the traditional thingy would have still been kept, which it was in most of continental Europe, but not in Sweden and Britain. Yeah.
I think it's just most people are lazy, and if
Yeah.
you have the alternative between cooking a quick meal that takes 10 minutes and preparing a meal from scratch that takes like an hour or two, most people most of the time are going to take the first option.
No, no, yeah. It is a convenience society that, or maybe I should say, a bunch of convenience societies that we've created in Europe, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And especially when you have the infrastructure necessary to sustain that, this is one of the logical conclusions, even though the NHS doesn't like it. Because yeah, I mean, if you don't have to climb upstairs every day because you have escalators, if you don't have to walk too much because there's a bus to everything or a subway to everything, if you don't have to stand too much, if you don't really have to do anything that's physically demanding, and at the same time you eat a lot of crap, yeah, you're gonna get fat. Tough.
Yeah, it's just one of these downsides of
Prosperity.
of wealth and prosperity and civilization. But I mean, it's a really good problem to have. I'd rather
Yeah,
have this problem of obesity than the problem of starvation. That's
yeah,
100 times better to have.
absolutely. I mean, we are tempted. We are tempted when we read these kinds of news stories to to poke fun at fat feminists, and for bloody good reason. They are funny to poke fun at. But yeah, it is in the end quite literally a first world problem, and
Yep.
it is sorry, and it is a good problem to have for sure. Right.
Yep.
Let's go. Oh, the wonders of academia. Go ahead.
Coming from News 18, Oxford University plans takeout exam to help women get better grades. The University of Oxford is planning to introduce a so-called takeout exam as part of its history course to help women get better grades. One of Oxford University's 5 final year history exams will be replaced by a paper that can be done at home to try to improve results for female students, the Sunday Times reported. The move will be introduced from the next academic year in an attempt to bridge a wide gap between male and female students' first-class degrees. Internal documents obtained under Freedom of Information laws by the newspaper said, quote, "This course in particular showed one of the largest gender gaps in results between women and men. As women and men perform more equally in submitted work, it was proposed that a takeout exam with questions similar to that in the timed exam should be implemented." Statistics reveal that 32% of women achieved a first in history at Oxford, and compared with 37% of men. Cambridge University, where the average gender gap is nearly 9 percentage points across all subjects, is also reviewing its exam system, quote, "in order to understand fully any variations and how we can mitigate them effectively." The attainment gaps between men and women at 2 of the UK's leading universities leave them out of step with the direction of travel across the education world. Nearly a quarter of both sexes achieved firsts in 2015-2016 across all universities. Also, girls do better than boys at the UK school exams and tend to outnumber their male peers in higher education. According to research in schools, boys prefer the cut and thrust of unseen exams, whereas girls thrive where consistent work and diligence are rewarded. Oxford University said, "Timed exams remain an important part of the course, testing skills to complement the other assessed elements. The gender gap was a consideration in this change."
What the proverbial fuck? I mean, that's all I have to say.
So, girls do better than boys, women do better than men in most parts of the education system. Not a problem. I guess girls are just smarter or more diligent or whatever, or they're better behaved. When it's the other way around, no, then that's a problem. And something needs to be done because obviously the system of testing is unfair and men are unfairly advantaged. Wah, wah, wah.
Smirk. Yeah. Well, it is true in the end that indeed men do prefer the well, how do they put it here? The thrust of direct exams, I think they called it.
The cut and thrust of unseen exams.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, it is true, and it is also true that women not necessarily prefer, not necessarily do better, but indeed do prefer this kind of kindergarten type of progression where you have to write a lot and well, they see here consistent work and diligence. Well, yeah, that's basically kindergarten approach. Yeah, women do prefer that version. Whether they do better or not in that version is a separate story, but indeed they do prefer it.
I wouldn't call it a kindergarten approach. I mean, this sort of thing where you have to consistently put in effort is really quite similar to what you have to do in a lot of jobs, where it's not the question of performing extraordinarily well on one particular day for like 2 hours, but rather just doing your work every day over a month and years. So it makes sense to test that too. But what I do object to is to say, women are doing worse, therefore we have to change it. That's the part I disagree with.
Yeah, yeah, but probably this is why. Well, again, there is the fact that men are more varied within each other. We vary more from individual to individual. But most men would rather try to do something like entrepreneurship or whatnot. I mean, it's not. Uh, a man doesn't dream about going to a place to do the same thing over and over again. A significant chunk, or let me put it this way: more men than women dream about doing something that is that changes constantly and requires uh, the cut and thrust of the and the thrills that come within the free market. There are not many women who would rather prefer that. So yeah, and these differences do exist. Now, trying to accommodate the entire education system to this time purposefully advantage girls over boys, yeah, maybe that's not such a good idea.
Yeah, and it sort of does make you wonder whether all this gender gap that already exists in favor of girls is actually because of girls being smarter or more hardworking, or whether it's due to the education system being reformed in such a way as to help girls.
Now, I don't know specifically about Oxford, but the pre-university system, the K-12, I don't know how they call it in Britain. If I am to believe Aaron Pizzey, and I see no reason not to, it is pretty much because the uh, system has been slowly, incrementally, quote unquote, reformed, which essentially means in practice that virtually any yeah, I'm gonna call it every feminine quality is significantly very very rewarded, whereas any non-feminine quality, and especially the exclusively or mostly masculine qualities, are penalized. So basically, if you want to be successful as a boy in a British school, especially the state schools, of course, get ready to be a girl. If you can't, tough.
Yeah, and I mean, as for why Cambridge and Oxford do have these why the gender gap there is worst, I would speculate that maybe it's because of the different ability distribution between men and women. Like if you look at IQ tests, we know um, that the variance is significantly or quite a bit higher for men than it is for women, so that there are more male
More
geniuses than female geniuses. So that I mean, because intelligence is normally distributed, um, there's a very few people at the tail. So even if the distribution is just a little bit wider for men, it means that if you go up to like 130, 140 IQ points, there's much more men there than there are women. And to get into one of these top universities and to get the top grades at them, you typically have to be really, really smart. It's not just about
yeah,
hard work, which of course is also required, but you also have to be really, really smart.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
would
And
be my explanation.
yeah, and many people get really upset when you say in public that look, there's just more male geniuses than female geniuses. It's just the way it is. And many people get really upset when you point this out. Not just feminists. I mean, even people who are not who are maybe sometimes anti-feminist, they still think that, oh, it kind of feels wrong to put it this way. And I'm like, I don't care how you feel. Facts don't care about your feelings, as uh, our favorite Jew Ben Shapiro likes to say. But there is a corollary to that. Yes, there are more male geniuses than female geniuses, but also means there are a lot more male idiots than female idiots. I mean, if you look at the other end of the scale, women are still outnumbered quite by a high margin.
Yeah, just I mean, even if you just like think about your like personal experience in your life um, with people who are mentally challenged, it is indeed true that the majority of them that I know that I've observed personally are male. That seems to check out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's basically men at the top, men at the bottom, and women somewhere in the middle, roughly speaking. Now, of course, this isn't an absolute rule. That doesn't mean one should always, or even one should even bother himself or herself with this when setting goals in life. But it is something to be taken into account when you're looking at broader average statistics on a university as big as Oxford or Cambridge. And these things do matter. Tilting the
Yep.
entire system just because you see, oh my God, women are doing 5% worse or whatever, or 5 percentage points. Sorry. Yeah. So, so what? You already have uh, female pupils being advantaged throughout the K-12. And this is, again, an established fact. Even the British mainstream media wrote about it several times, and we covered it on this show. So you already have that. Maybe, just maybe, something isn't really that broken, and you don't really need to fix it.
Yep.
All right. So we spoke
And
about Oxford. Let's go
on
to
a
the other
related note,
prestigious.
coming from Heat Street, Cambridge academics told, don't praise students for male attributes of genius, brilliance, and flair. Cambridge academics are being discouraged from praising students for their genius, brilliance, or flair because these are seen as male qualities. Tutors at the prestigious university are being told to drop the attributes as assessment criteria on the grounds that they alienate women and make it harder for them to succeed. The policy is part of an overhaul of arts teaching at Cambridge, which also encompasses removing paintings of eminent male academics and stripping men's work out of reading lists. The strategy was outlined by Dr. Lucy Delap, who is carrying out the program in Cambridge's Faculty of History. Dr. Delap, who belongs to the university's all-female Murray Edwards College, said that rewarding brilliance or flair, quote, carries assumptions of gender inequality and also discriminates against poor and ethnic minority students. Her intervention on the BBC's Today program from 2 hours and 38 minutes came a day after it was revealed that Oxford's history department has overhauled its exam structure to make it easier for women to get first-class degrees, which we covered before. Delap, who has published extensively on feminism and gender history, told the program, female students arriving in an Oxford college can still find in a male-dominated environment. If you look at something as simple as the art on the walls of a college, it's often by men. They depict men, and often they're white men as well. Their reading lists. We want to use language that is transparent. We're rewriting our first 2 years of our history degree to create a wider set of paper choices to make assessment criteria clearer and to really try and root out the unhelpful and very vague talk of genius, of brilliance, of flair, which carries assumptions of gender inequality and also of class and ethnicity. She denied that her plans amounted to censoring out male influence. Of course she does.
Of course it does. I hear noises of helicopters somewhere in the far away. They're coming for I hope for Mrs. Delop. No, these kinds of people need to be just helicoptered. I mean, come on, give me a freaking break. Women who go to Cambridge, oh my God, they feel so pressured when they go to, when they finally get admitted to Cambridge to study art, because oh my God, there's a painting depicting a white man. Oh, give me a fucking break. I mean, really?
Yeah.
We were joking several years ago when we said feminism is childism, but it kind of is. I mean, it is feminism that comes with this assumption that women are so bloody stupid and so fragile and so insecure and so basically a burden upon the entire society because they can't really cope with the fact that, oh my God, there is a painting by a white man on the wall. I mean, they get triggered and it is already inherently harder for them to succeed just because they see that. Now, we don't believe that, even though we are the ones accused of being misogynistic. This is feminist belief. I mean, if the culture really cared about rooting out misogyny, then helicoptering feminists like this, like Delap, yeah, that would be a great step forward towards women equality, towards women's equality, and towards generally towards rooting out sexism in the universities in Cambridge in this category, in this particular case. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, what do you even say to that? It's like genius, brilliance, and flair. Did you, before reading this article, think of these as exclusively male categories? Like,
Exclusively, no,
I mean,
and not
that
even.
in terms
Go
of
ahead.
genius, that's like a primarily male category because, well, most geniuses are men,
Yeah.
duh. But it's not nothing particularly male about it. It's no one would see anything amiss if you describe a woman as a genius if she's actually a genius, or a
Mhm.
woman as brilliant, or as having flair.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's,
Flair is the most surprising of them. I mean, uh, I don't think there is any evidence to say that uh, more men than women possess flair. I mean, yeah, with genius, there is some case to be made, and if you apply feminist logic to it, there's definitely a case to be made. But with brilliance, and particularly with flair, that's a very, very bizarre example.
yeah,
Uh, I don't think there. I mean, I don't remember seeing any evidence that there's more men than women that have flair, or that flair is more appreciated in men than it is in women. But if that were true, then again, it would be even better to appreciate it in women instead of censoring it out, like this particular disdainful cunt is trying to do.
yeah.
Dr. Delap, give me a fucking break. Helicopters everywhere. Yeah, and it is in a way sad, but on the other hand, I'm kind of glad to see Oxbridge, that would be Oxford and Cambridge, collapsing like this. It's fantastic. I've been dreaming about the collapse of these establishmentarian universities for almost a decade now, saying I'm looking forward to see you all go down and crash and burn. That's great that it's happening. So in a way, it is sad, but over the long run, I don't think it is a bad thing at all. It is quite a good thing. These motherfuckers need to go down and be replaced by something else, because they will be replaced by something else. The universities will have to fundamentally transform. Uh, Whether they will transform in something that would still resemble a university or not, that probably remains to be seen. Although that may be indeed the case. I was talking with a Swede the other day, that we should probably get a closer look to what happens at Mizzou University, where basically when everyone saw those videos with the "I need some muscles" and whatnot, and all the institutionalized racism going on there, real institutionalized racism, not what leftists imagine. And so many students pulled out their shackles from there and whatnot, that they had to shut down portions of the campus because there was no one there. And as a result, slowly but surely, they had to start reforming the curricula because, because otherwise bankruptcy would start knocking. And probably what's happened there will slowly be seen by other universities too. Now, of course, it's going to be the hardest with Oxford and Cambridge because these are usually the most resilient to change institutions, but still.
Yeah, what was it Mrs. Thatcher said that socialism works as long as well, it works until you run out of other people's money, and
Yeah.
apparently that applies also to universities.
Yeah, they can afford their safe spaces and their nonsense and their menstrual studies and vaginal knitting studies and whatever the hell they're doing there. That only works as long as you have an enormous amount of surplus shekels, either distributed to you directly or by stupid students, basically, or or indirectly via the welfare state. And mostly it's the second version. And again, these kinds of things of removing paintings of white men or because or the made by white men and whatnot. This is not really a new idea. I mean, this kind of thing happened. The first time I read about it was here in Stockholm at the Stockholm University, which I went to. We descended into their campus. I wanted to see because they removed many of the old paintings by uh, um, made to depict old doctors and whatnot, professors of law, from the past, and they didn't replace it with anything. I mean, they said they were going to replace it with something diverse, and it was so diverse that it was nothing instead of them. And in the main hall, in the main lecture hall, they put in something that looks like a uterus, and it's in the faggotry flag, the rainbow flag. And I wanted to go in the and videotape that, but sadly, the main lecture hall was locked down and couldn't get into it. But again, this is not really a new idea, and it just seems to me that so many of these really bad ideas not only start from universities, but so many of them I can trace them back to here, to Sweden, and that's a bit frightening.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do next? Are they going to burn books written by white men? Maybe that's the next
Oh,
step.
that happened already. Well, they haven't burned them, but there was at I think it was at Mizzou that they moved them towards the end of the library and whatnot, make them harder. I mean that already sort of happened. It's not exactly so. I wouldn't be totally surprised that soon enough the book burnings will be attempted. But thankfully, these asshats don't have political power, and many of them probably won't anytime soon, if ever. I like the ever part. Uh, so if everyone can just go in and watch what's happening, the circus that universities are slowly becoming, or some of them have already become, it would be a good lesson for the rest of the society. As in, okay, we're gonna use the universities as our model, but this time as a negative model instead of
Yeah.
the positive one. Yeah, just don't do like that. Right. Speaking of negative communities and negative models, let's go to Sweden. Right. Coming from Sveriges Radio, the state radio station in Sweden, 150,000 women in Sweden are at risk of genital mutilation. The number of female genital mutilation cases in Sweden is increasing and may be considerably higher than previously estimated. That's what an upcoming study of European countries that SVT News has taken part of it tends to show. The study shows that there may be around 150,000 women in Sweden who have been exposed to genital mutilation. In 2015, the National Board of Health assessed that approximately 38,000 women in Sweden are genitally mutilated. The summary shows that Sweden is one of the countries that has the largest proportion of women from countries where genital mutilation is very common, such as Ethiopia and Somalia. Oh, I thought it's Norway and Finland. Anyway, the large number of women in Sweden who've suffered from this practice is making new demands on the healthcare system and schools, added to SVT Nyheter, Mrs. Bita Esragi, female physician at Sweden's only specialist reception center for women who've suffered from FGM. Isn't it nice? What they don't say in this particular article, but I will say because probably the next question is what about the MGM levels? They've stayed pretty much stable, and that would be stably low. So it's interesting. The most feminist country in the world, or at the very least in Europe, fails again at protecting women.
Funny how that works out.
Funny how that works out. I mean, Alan Yaronbrook, whom I'm not really a big fan of, but he was right when he wrote all the way back 20 years ago, 25 years ago in 92, when he said there's nothing more misogynistic than feminism. It's nothing that really hates and oppresses women more than feminism. And surprise, surprise, here it goes again.
Of course, it would be bad for a feminist business model to actually protect women, because then they would no longer be vulnerable and in need of feminism.
Yeah.
So it actually makes sense from the feminist perspective to not do a very good job of protecting women.
Yeah, it does tend to work like a trade union, doesn't it?
I mean, the feminism basically it fuels itself on the suffering of women.
Mm-hmm. No.
Or at least the perceived or real suffering. And real suffering is a lot better than perceived suffering, because it's a lot more salient and a lot more convincing.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. It is sad to see this happening, and it's one of the many facets in this country where it's just things do seem like being like they're tearing apart. It is uh, not that bad as you would read on some conspiracy blogs, but it is getting worse, and to the extent that even the mainstream Swedish media is starting to slowly acknowledge at least some of these issues. I mean, 3 years ago in 2014, 15, we would read these things from Fria Tid, which was at the time considered a far right fascist blog. Not anymore, apparently. It was never a fascist blog, but at the time, you would only read these things there. Now, slowly, even the state media has to, yeah, kind of, sort of admit, yeah, there might be a problem, and yeah, we're not really that great and whatnot. So I guess there is some progress on that front.
Yep.
But still, there are still some provinces in Sweden that subsidize male genital mutilation. Actually, two. One of them is Skåne, because we talked about it, and the other one is, I think it's something from Norrland. I forgot which one is. But yeah, I would love to see a little bit more of coverage from that too, from the state media. Because again, the one with circumcision was covered by a politically incorrect blog. But if things follow the same trend, I guess we may hope that in a few years, the mainstream will start caring about that too.
Yep.
I mean, we obviously don't like it that we have to trail behind women's issues on certain things. But, 3 years later is still better than never.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Going on with the sad news from Sweden. What's it? Oh, yeah, from Svenska Dagbladet. Freedom of speech is not a given to Swedes. A majority of Swedes may think of restricting freedom of expression, writes Professor Ulla Karlsson and Lennart Weibel on Nyheter Idag's page, referring to the annual SOM survey from 2015. It shows that citizens can imagine the restricting freedom of expression to protect children and young people, to protect national security, to counter racism, and prevent the violation of individuals. I have no idea what they mean by the last one. On the other hand, there is a clear majority against restricting freedom of expression to protect religious values. The survey shows that people with great political interest are least likely to restrict freedom of expression. The writers also see the result as a form of criticism of the media's respect for personal integrity. The result indicates that freedom of speech is not questioned, but that many citizens consider that regulations need to be adapted to reality where digitalization has changed the conditions for publicist activity, citizens, media, and communication habits, and the whole concept of sense of personal integrity, adds Carlson and Weinbull. These professors are both active at Göteborgs Universitet, at the University of Gothenburg. It is a bit sad, but it is better than the previous surveys. The last one that I know of was made in 2012, I think, where there was also a slight majority in favor of restricting freedom of expression to protect quote-unquote religious values. So at the very least, the Islamist experience seems to have shifted that particular portion around. That's great. But still, this thing of, to protect children and young people, to counter racism. Yeah, it seems that Swedes haven't learned yet that whenever you allow this thing, it eventually becomes Islam is a race, and you're not allowed to say anything about girls being genitally mutilated in particular no-go zones.
Yeah, I mean, whether Islam is a race or not, it's just depends on the circumstances. I mean, haven't you watched today's Anita Sarkeesian video?
No, I haven't. I've been in Sweden. I'm getting Anita Sarkeesian daily on the streets. No need for more of that. But please do tell me more.
Yeah, it's just the greatest doublethink imaginable. It's just like, what is it? First, she talks about how Islamophobia is such a great problem, and how Muslims are always portrayed in the pop culture in a very negative way as terrorists and so on. And then she explains that Islam is not a race and that Arabs are not a race. Um, but then she says, but Islamophobia is still racism.
How does that supposed to work? Oh wait, no, hold on a second. I
It's
think I know how.
not. It's not. It's just you just have to apply the appropriate amount of doublethink, and then it all makes sense.
Yeah, and think about it this way: the reason you say it's not supposed to work is because it's illogical. But then you're forgetting that the same individual, Anita, declared that logic is a patriarchal construct. So who the hell cares? It doesn't have to be logical. I mean, that would mean submitting to the patriarchy, and we cannot have that, can we?
No, no, no.
That would be insane. But yeah, it is still a bit sad to me because um, the amount of I mean the fact that Sweden is such a consensus driven society, to learn that most Swedes still haven't learned anything about how the consensus can be subverted because their own consensus has been subverted, and now they're slowly waking up, but they still haven't woken up enough, if I am to believe this particular study by these two professors at Göteborg's University. It's too bad that I read this article while I was in the train station in Göteborg getting ready to get back to Stockholm. If I had read it 4 hours earlier, I would have actually gone to to look for them at the university. Maybe I could have interviewed them. But yeah, it is a bit sad. It is a bit sad, and it just shows that and this is not true just in Sweden. It's true in most of Europe. We just don't appreciate in enough numbers. We don't appreciate freedom of speech.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of things that I don't appreciate about the United States, but at least they do have this First Amendment, which does protect freedom of speech more or less. It's not perfect, but it is pretty good, and we don't have anything comparable in most European countries. That's quite sad.
Yeah, there are a few in the intermarium in Eastern Europe. There are a few who have this, censorship is forbidden and things like that, which are good, but not First Amendment here, for sure. And oh, come on, it's also appreciative. The Second Amendment. I would love a European Second Amendment. That would be fantastic. Uh, I hate it that I have to go all the way to Belgrade to use my gun. I mean, come on, it's just so sad. But then again, Europe is a very sad continent overall, so there's that.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. It's still a pretty good continent. One of
Yeah,
the
but
best.
Yeah, but it's sad. But just because it's
Could be
good,
so much greater.
could be what?
It could be so much greater.
Yeah, it could be. So someone needs to make Europe great again. Yeah. So still, good news in a way that Swedes have started to learn that maybe religion shouldn't be protected that much. Okay. Yeah, and on the personal integrity stuff, I have to say another aspect. This paper says that, oh my god, the media protects the sense of personal integrity too much and whatnot. Well, actually, that's true only if it comes to the personal integrity of leftists, because just a few days ago, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, on Wednesday, there was another article, also on Nyheter Idag, where basically a 66-year-old lady, a pensioner, was lynched through the media, through Sweden's biggest newspaper, Dagens Nyheter, or Dagens Kukheter, as I like to call it. They lynched her name they dragged her name through the mud. They put her picture, her home address, her full name, her former profession. What was her crime? She wrote a politically incorrect comment 2 years ago on an obscure website.
What? How dare she?
Yeah. So the fact that this shows again that these professors from the University of Gothenburg, they are also very disconnected from reality. I mean, they're criticizing the media. Oh, they have such a huge sense of personal integrity. Yeah, well, only when it comes to leftists and communists and Islamist terrorists. Yes, then they suddenly have their ethics and they don't publish stuff. But when it comes to non-leftists, there's no problem. I mean, they would lynch you, and drag your good name through the through the mud just because potato, just because they can.
Yep.
Welcome to DDR. Sorry, I mean Sweden. Okay. Next one, also from this place, from Nyheter Idag. Kawesa about Almedalen, white middle class arrangements that are expensive. Now, background story: Almedalen is an annual event in Stockholm where the folks from all political parties gather, and they essentially have a sort of collection of political events, and of course big speeches are being held and whatnot, and the event is public. I mean, anyone can attend, anyone can videotape, anyone can ask questions to politicians, and you can pretty much rub shoulders with the prime minister if you're lucky enough and whatnot. I mean, it's a very remarkable event. I'm hoping that I will videotape it next year. So yeah, Kawesa is the new chief of my favorite political party in Sweden, Feminist Initiative, the Feminist Initiative. Right. So with that in mind, quote, a white middle class arrangement that few can afford to participate in, and which also protects Nazis who want to kill everyone who advocates for human rights. This is the main speech of the Politics Week in Almedalen, says party leader Victoria Kawesa from the Feminist Initiative in her speech on the other minor political event, Järvaspolitik. Now, Järvaspolitik Week is another event similar to Almedalen, but smaller. I've actually been to it. It was this week, where essentially political parties go into the diverse and culturally enriched areas. That would be the Islamic no-go zones of Stockholm, in Tensta and Rinkeby. I actually was there and videotaped this Monday. And they go there trying to convince people there to actually participate in the political process, because many of them don't vote at all. It's not that they vote for a particular party, they just don't vote. And I wanted to interview these actually the deputy in chief from Feminist Initiative was there, and I wanted to interview her, and she said no. Anyway, so continuing on with the article, the political event from Järva has begun. The purpose of the week, which is actually 9 days long and lasts between 10th and 18th of June, is to reduce the distance between politicians and residents. Like the political week in Almedalen, each parliamentary party and the Feminist Initiative have been assigned a thematical day. Today, June the 10th, is the theme day of the Feminist Initiative. The party leader, Victoria Kawesa, spends her speech on the Järvaspolitik Week to explain why the Feminist Initiative chose to boycott the event of Almedalen. The reason is found in the planned presence of the Nazi Nordic resistance movement at the event. Quote, what is so hard to understand is that everyone knows that the National Resistance Movement is a right-wing, violent, radicalized organization, says Victoria Kawesa, aiming at the Nordic resistance movement, which she continues, saying on her website that they want to kill the Prime Minister. They want to kill all of us who do not have white Swedish blood in our bodies. Kawesa also tells us that the Nordic resistance movement wants to kill race traitors, according to Kawesa, and that means everyone who stands for human rights will be killed. It is this group that it is being protected during the Almedalen, she continues. The political party Feminist Initiative has heard arguments about freedom of speech, something she thinks is strange, because the freedom of expression of the Nordic resistance movement, according to Kawesa, does not only mean expressing opinions. Quote, but the Nazis also have freedom of expression, and this is very strange, because this freedom of expression would mean that they have the freedom to violate and threaten and kill. End quote. According to Kawesa, it is a shame that the established parties chose to, quote, mingle with the Nazis, end quote, instead of, quote, putting pressure on organizers and police to ban them from being at the Almedalen. The fact that the Nazis are in Almedalen is not the only thing wrong with Politics Week, according to Feminist Initiative Director Victoria Kawesa. Her party has participated in the Almedalen Week basically every year in the last decade. 7 years ago, the party was very attentive when Kawesa's party leader at the time and colleague, Gudrun Schyman, stood at the barbecue and fired up 100,000 kronor for an enthusiastic journalist. The pouring of money was celebrated by PR consultants, but was also criticized by many Swedes who thought that the money could have been used for the needy instead. According to Kawesa, it is a problem that Almedalen has become such an expensive business that also has a certain ethnic and classical character. I think they meant classist. Yeah. Well, Swedish papers also don't have good editors. Almedalen is still a white middle-class arrangement. Not everyone can afford to go to Almedalen, said the party leader for the Feminist initiative. There costs one trip by subway. So, it's not really that expensive. I mean, I don't know how it is a white middle-class arrangement. And if you're really that poor, the state will subsidize your trip to there. Well, any metro trip, including a trip to Almedalen. So what exactly is you talking about? Still, really, really nice. So this is basically a continuation of the previous piece of news. Yeah, freedom of speech is good, but not freedom of speech for the Nazis. Really?
Because freedom of speech means they're going to murder people. Apparently,
and violate their whatever. This is the Feminist initiative. I wanted to speak with them, and the guy that I'm actually broadcasting from his house, Paul suggested that I should just go and full troll them, say that I identify as a Kyrgyzstani refugee and whatnot. Whereas I said, no, we probably should approach them seriously, and once they answer one or two questions seriously, then we'll start trolling them. That was my approach, and eventually we said, okay, well, at the very least, let's try. And I went with the camera to their booth at the political Yarva event in the no-go zone in Tiensta. And I asked them, look, with the YouTube channel, whatnot, would like to speak with you. And the first lady that we spoke with, was, yeah, sure. Let me call someone more senior from the party. And as I was setting up my tripod and whatnot, the more alpha feminist came in, full colored hair and very dyke looking, of course. And she said, okay, what do you want to talk about? And I said, oh, look, about the economy, I wanted to ask them serious policy questions before trolling them, of course. And she got scared when I said that I was going to ask them about their policy on the military. And I said, no, we're going to pass. No, we're not going to speak with the press. No. And I stayed there for another 2 hours. I said, okay, maybe they didn't like my face. Maybe they'll speak with another journalist, because there were many journalists in there. No, they rejected every request from all the journalists. So,
why are they in there then?
Good question. Well, they were there basically to apparently the only people that they were speaking with were children. I have footage with them speaking with the children that attended the Yarva event in Tiensta. And it's probably because children are the only ones willing to listen to them for more than 10 seconds. I don't know. Could be that.
I guess you just have to get them when they're young and credible.
Yeah. And besides, they had good candies, for sure.
Oh, okay,
yeah. In their booth they had good candies. I took like 50 of them. Well, I took one and I was like, oh my god, this one is good, and I took this a whole hand of them because it was just good.
Just come into the feminist van. They have candy. What could go wrong?
Yeah. So welcome to Sweden, basically. I mean, I introduced these ones in the podcast just to say welcome to Sweden. And again, there is a huge neighborhood in Stockholm called Södermalm, where 40 to 50% of the inhabitants vote for this political party. They voted for this lady.
Quite sad.
Yeah. Now you do understand why I'm depressed. Well, sort of, because tomorrow I'm coming back to sanity. So yeah. Right. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is from the Wochenzeitung from Switzerland. Urgent adjustment to the realities of life. When is a rape a rape? The Swiss criminal code has a clear idea. According to Article 190, only the forceful penetration of a vagina with a penis counts as rape. So firstly, only women can be raped in Switzerland, and secondly, only men can be rapists. Other genders, of course, don't exist at all in our law. All other forms of sexualized transgression and penetration, even if it is felt as being equally bad by victims, are counted as sexual assaults under Article 189, which presumably originates from the idea that a rape is especially bad if a woman might become pregnant from it. Switzerland is alone in sticking to this outmoded definition, which was never correct. Other European countries have corrected such definitions decades ago. A cantonal initiative by the Canton Geneva, which will be discussed in the Council of States on Monday, seeks to redefine the term rape in the Swiss Penal Code to include other forms of penetration, and so that men can also be recognized as victims. The chances for the change to go through seem good, as the Judicial Commission of both councils have recommended accepting the initiative. This does not mean that the issue is not controversial. Such an adjustment was not necessary in light of practical jurisprudence, said the SVP at the preceding discussions, as did, for example, the SP councillor Daniel Josic. And for reference, the SVP is National Conservative Party, and the SP are the Social Democrats. Indeed, a decision by the Federal Court of Justice from 2006 says that forcing someone to, quote, intercourse-like activities has to be punished with equal severity as rape. The sentences for convicted perpetrators would thus hardly change with the passing of the initiative. But that's not the point. Victims' organizations keep pointing out how important it is to the coping process to recognize the suffering endured and to confirm the victim's own perception. A judicial verdict is often an important part of societal recognition. The redefinition of the judicial term is therefore nothing short of long overdue adjustment to the realities of life.
I don't know if it's a good news or a bad news. I mean, if the sentencing has already been equalized and in practice things are the way we're supposed to be, then I'm not really convinced that this is necessarily a good news. Besides, I don't really like this language. Oh, it is important to confirm the victim's own perceptions. That kind of language can be very dangerous and can so easily be abused.
Yeah, I mean, this article is very social justice-y, but that doesn't mean that the actual implementation of the law will be social justice-y.
I don't know. The Switzerland is the same country where someone was sentenced, for rape because he forgot to put his condom or something like that. So yeah, I'm not so sure. I mean, Switzerland has been getting a little bit social justice lately with these kinds of things. Just saying.
Yeah, we have to see how this actually plays out. But I actually do think that it is important to open up the definition of rape to include more than just, men penally penetrating a vagina. That's, I mean, even if you have the same kind of, or at least in theory, the same kind of punishment for male victims of sexual assaults, and for sexual assaults committed by women, it still does matter whether you call it rape or not, because even if the punishment theoretically is the same, it still has a very different sort of social connotation, whether someone is being convicted of rape or of sexual assault. And even if in theory the sentencing should be the same, it doesn't mean that judges won't be influenced by whether the crime they're considering is rape or just sexual assault.
So you're basically arguing on cultural grounds more than legal grounds.
Yes. I mean,
Mhm.
an alternative approach would be what some countries have done. I think that, for example, Canada has done this, that they just eliminated the term rape from the legal language. It's just all different types of sexual assault. That's also a practical way of going about it. But if you have to have this term rape, then I think it should be applied in a gender neutral way.
I see. Yeah, because the only place in Europe where there is still a serious problem is the United Kingdom, where men cannot be victims of rape, and they can only be victims of sexual assault. But the penalties for sexual assault are mm, lower, not significantly lower, but lower. So that's really an issue. Whereas in Switzerland, the punishments have been equalized by various Supreme Court decisions and whatnot. So in practice, maybe it doesn't make such a difference in terms of legality, but you do have a point on the cultural side of things, because um, it is probably a difference in terms of, for instance, someone seeking employment. Um, it does make a difference if that someone was sentenced for quote unquote sexual assault or for rape. It does make a difference. And whereas you gave the example of Canada, I wasn't aware of that, but if it's true, it probably is. Yeah, probably now in Canada, everyone thinks of sexual assault as, yeah, probably rape. So in that case, it still achieves the same cultural effect, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, it does make sense in a way, but I just think you have to be consistent. I think it's a bad idea to have the different definitions of crimes that just can just be committed against a particular sex or only by a particular sex. That's just a really bad idea, I think.
Yeah, although yeah, and this is especially true with rape, since we everyone knows or should know that women can and indeed do commit rape. Maybe not at identical rates with men, but they clearly do. Although I think there is one crime that is very, very gendered. It's called paternity fraud. I have yet to hear a man committing paternity fraud. I mean, there simply are crimes that probably will have to remain defined in a sexed manner. I mean, I don't know how you define paternity fraud in a gender neutral way.
I suppose it's possible. Like you could have, for example, paternity fraud where children are switched at the hospital, and like if that's done deliberately, presumably that would be an example of paternity fraud, maybe something like that. But it would have been some sort of particularly contrived example. In sort of
Yeah,
normal circumstances, paternity fraud is only committed by women. But I
yeah,
think, at least in theory, the law should be framed in a gender neutral way. That's if for some way a man manages to convince a woman that a child is hers when it actually isn't, that should also be counted as the same crime.
parental fraud or something. Yeah, it just sounds bizarre. I'm not really that extremist when it comes to these things. I mean, laws are, or at least should be, and they were until relatively recently, uh, at least in more free places, uh, were a reflection of the overall society. I mean, going the full, you're basically being German now. You're going full technocratic on me, and I feel oppressed by that, by the way,
Okay, I'm sorry.
and offended, and marginalized, and terribly, terribly offended, and it wreaks havoc upon my emotional well-being. Um, so what? Right. Anyway, I hope it does have the effects that they want. In the end, see it as a bad news either. Yeah, Switzerland joins the 21st century. Congratulations. Good luck. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to Die Welt.
Moving to the Welt. Matter of factly, public prosecutor shows up von der Leyen. In the Pfullendorf barracks, sexually sadistic practices were a matter of course, at least if you believe in the picture painted by Defense Minister von der Leyen. Unfortunately, she has forgotten the presumption of innocence. In Ursula von der Leyen's narrative, the Bundeswehr barracks in Pfullendorf is a kind of reconstruction of the biblical dens of iniquity, Sodom and Gomorrah. What happened in the training center for combat medics was, quote, repulsive and disgusting, as the defense minister keeps repeating since the end of January. These are shocking signs of a lack of leadership, poise, and culture. Von der Leyen revels in describing details of the practices taught in the barracks, such as, quote, palpation of the exposed genital area with a non-gloved hand and subsequent smell tests, and, quote, opening the buttocks to inspect the rectum. She bemoans degrading training practices, discrimination, bullying, and humiliation. And finally, Physician von der Leyen sets up the ultimate judicial drop height, a violation of the Article 1 of the Grundgesetz, the German Constitution. Quote, the principle of the inviolability of human dignity was not sustained. As far as other principles are concerned, the politician does not much care. For example, the rule of law or the presumption of innocence. Von der Leyen's narratives are actually based just on the perceptions of individual soldiers. Whether these are accurate or not has to be investigated. Until then, all accusations should be uttered in the subjunctive, as a possible truth. The minister, however, likes to tell her tales in the indicative and evokes the impression of things that have actually happened. The prosecutorial office in Hechingen, which is responsible for the Pfullendorf barracks, is more familiar with the rule of law. The prosecutors took the statements of the minister as an opportunity to investigate the issue and to verify whether, quote, the public accusation that sexually sadistic practices had been common in the Stauffer barracks is actually true. The result of the senior prosecutor: the elements of crime against sexual self-determination or any other crime were not present. The preliminary investigation was closed. Skipping a bit here. Indeed, the accusation of a female soldier on whom von der Leyen based important parts of her account did not stand up to a juridical investigation. Trainees were stripped naked and were filmed doing so. Didn't happen, according to reports of the prosecutors. The insertion of a tamponade in the rectum was not practiced. Women doing erotic pole dancing and being groped by superiors? No evidence for any of that. And then it just goes on to describe various other accusations that also are either disproven or there's no or very little evidence for them. So basically, this is a case where, like, for several weeks, von der Leyen has conducted some sort of purge of the Bundeswehr, the German army, because allegedly there are some Nazi sympathizers there and people doing all sorts of perverse initiation rites and some sort of abuses of power and so on. And apparently the evidence for that is rather slim. There's also like a couple of people that have already been suspended, and the evidence for any of that is rather slim.
Nazi sympathizers in the current year in the German army. Give me a fucking break. Really? I mean, I would be more willing to believe that there are 100,000 genuine capitalists in Sweden than that there are Nazi sympathizers in the German army. Give me a fucking break. Of those things did used to happen in especially in conscription military services all over Europe. Whether they're happening now or not, I would say they don't. Apparently, the prosecutor agrees with me. I don't think those things are really that common, and if they are, well, sometimes, I mean, it's this thing that many politicians tend to have, that, oh my God, we as the anointed ones, the political class, we get to regulate everything. No, you don't. I mean, the soldiers, if they're going to have an initiation ritual or whatnot, they're going to have it anyway, regardless of your opinion and regardless of what the politicians say. I mean, can you seriously tell me that the soldiers from an isolated area of, let's say, the demilitarized zone with the former Soviet Union in Finland, do you think they give a shit what the politicians in Helsinki have to say? Yeah, I would say they don't. And I presume the same thing is in Germany. I mean, the very small, tiny villages where there is such where there are the units. Do they even give a shit what the Ursula von der Leyen has to say? I don't think so.
Yeah, and it's just a thing that von der Leyen is not of the military. She never served in the military. She has no real connection to it. It's just, for her, it's just a job. That she's just gotten this job of being defense minister because wouldn't it be nice if you have the woman doing that job for the first time? And that's basically how she got the job. And sort of just culturally, she's just not a good fit for the Bundeswehr.
Yeah, because this is, and I was about to say what is her military experience. Thank you for providing the answer in advance. That would be nil, because only people who've never been in the army, and also who've never actually came out in the real world like at all, would be really surprised that, oh my God, there is a unit somewhere in the middle of bloody nowhere that has a more aggressive / kinky / whatever initiation ritual and whatnot. I mean, these things actually do happen in pretty much all militaries in the world, I presume, except the Iranian one, where you can actually get hanged for this. but anywhere else, probably they do, and probably even the Iranians ones when the chiefs don't watch. I mean, it is a different milieu in the military. It's just the interactions between individuals is significantly different than in the civilian world.
Yeah.
So again, even if some of those allegations might be true, yeah, my reaction is, yeah, so what? I mean, were you seriously injured, or were you kept there against your will or whatnot? No, yeah, okay, then fuck off. Oh, you felt a bit uncomfortable? Well, it's the military. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's not a safe space. Tough.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one looks fun.
Next one is from the Tagesspiegel, also from Germany. Why not just an avenue of the discriminated? In the African Quarter in Wedding, a borough of Berlin, some streets are to be renamed. The legacy of German colonialism is to be erased. The decision to this effect by the borough's parliament says that certain street names are, quote, no longer compatible with the contemporary understanding of democracy. Skipping a bit here. One of the people affected is Gustav Nachtigall, the father of ethnographic fieldwork, an Africa researcher of worldwide and lasting renown. He was fascinated by African cultures, learned numerous languages, and fought against the slave trade. It hardly needs saying that he got into trouble for that many times. Writes one encyclopedia. Nachtigall was, quote, one of the few great people in the history of the field who did not approach Africans as an arrogant traveler burdened with racist prejudice. However, he had for some time a leading position with the colonial government. By the way, would-be Hitler assassin Count Stauffenberg had for some time a leading position in the Nazi Wehrmacht, so why are there still streets named after him? He also didn't have a contemporary understanding of democracy. Instead, a street in Wedding is to be named after Nsiga of Mantamba. Queen Nsiga is very likely to have come to power by the murder of her brother. She converted to Catholicism to make political deals with the Portuguese and supplied the Dutch with approximately 12,000 slaves per year. So if everything goes according to plan, an opponent of the slave trade will be stripped of his street name in Berlin to name a street after a slave trader. This is happening in the name of political correctness, since a slave trader is black and a woman, a powerful woman. Wait a minute. How do you call it when you judge people based on the color of their skin and their sex? I believe the technical terms are racism and sexism. Nobody was perfect, and that goes both for Ms. Nsinga and Mr. Nachtigall. maybe the best way of solving the problem of Berlin street names is to just name them after attributes. How about that? Victim Street, Avenue of the Discriminated, Alley of Healthy Nutrition, or how about Square of Heavenly Peace? And to explain the last one, that's basically a Tiananmen Square, where Tiananmen is the gate of heavenly peace, and that's sort of the common name in German.
Yeah, yeah, I know that. The reason I started laughing is because the other day I was reading a joke with an English class where they were talking about, women have been oppressed and whatnot, and the pupil asks, were women in the 1950s free? And the teacher says no. And he's like, well, are you sure? Because they could have abortions like they can have now. They could vote just like they can now, and they have pretty much all of the rights. Oh yes, but still there were many barriers to the labor force and whatnot. Oh, so miss, you're saying that labor makes you free. Can you please repeat that for the German class? So yeah, so that's why I started laughing, because it was almost an identical pun in this particular article. As for the suggestion in general, yeah, that probably doesn't sound such a bad idea. I mean, it's still a good thing to have, the avenue of the discriminated than to have a street name after a slave trader. I mean, comparatively speaking, when you put it on the balance, it's probably better to have the avenue of the discriminated, because at the very least you can laugh about it. Whereas, oh yeah, and then there's the street name after the the queen that was selling black men to the Portuguese after having killed
The
her
Dutch.
brother. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, the Dutch. Yeah, and making political deals with the Portuguese. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the way in a way, this author's solution is superior to the solution found by the local council of Berlin. By the way, what the hell is wrong with the local council of Berlin? I mean, they've been pulling these kinds of stunts for decades. Sorry, for decades now. I mean, haven't they learned anything from the lessons of East Berlin?
I mean, it's Berlin. I mean, and
True.
Wedding is one of these particularly diverse places in Berlin. It's also one of the poorest and most crime-ridden areas in Berlin, and
I can confirm. That's true.
yeah, it's basically a bunch of diversity and starving artists in Wedding.
Yep. That's a very accurate description. Next time I'll go there, I'll have the camera with me. I hope they don't steal it from me and I get to actually keep the footage. But yeah, still, nevertheless, I mean, aren't they having a huge deficit and sort of a looming bankruptcy? Maybe they should take care of that instead of messing around with the street names. I mean, just saying.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they can just auction off some street names and they can raise some money that way.
Well, at least they should be doing
That
that.
might be a reasonable idea.
Yeah, it might be. It might be even a good idea. Although, you might have the Hitler did nothing wrong Strasse. I guess they should avoid auctioning it on the internet, because because then definitely you have the praise cake Strasse and the Hitler did nothing wrong Strasse. And the alley of the triggered. Yeah. All right. We'll be moving very fast through them, amazingly. All right. Sticking to the silly place, but moving a little bit southwestwards, I guess. Oh my God, this is the last one. We really moved fast. Coming from the Telegraph, but it's about Spain, particularly Madrid, which bans manspreading on buses. Madrid has moved to ban manspreading on its public transport system after feminists convinced the city's left-wing council that men invading the space of others with their splayed legs was a problem that needed to be tackled. Madrid's MET Transport Corporation has unveiled a new set of stickers to be placed on all city buses, including one of a male figure with his knees spread wide apart, accompanied by the slogan, "Respect Others' Space." The change comes about after a group called Mujeres en Lucha, Women at War, at Lucha, sorry. See what makes living in Sweden does to me. Launched a social network campaign against manspreading and presented a petition signed by 10,000 people to Madrid City Hall. It's a question of culture. We women have always been told to occupy the least amount of space possible, and men haven't, said a leader of the anti-men spreading campaign, Alejandra de la Fuente. I think I can hear the helicopters. Madrid Council, led by a coalition backed by the left-wing Podemos party, said the new rule was aimed specifically at male transport users who opened their legs and occupied two places. The council also pointed out that other antisocial behavior was being targeted in the new notices, including putting feet on seats and listening to loud music on headphones. But some men took to social network to denounce what they feel is sexist persecution of the male gender. The man part of the word is out of order. I have seen women with handbags and on other seats lying back and spreading their legs like men, says Jesus Heraiz from Madrid on Twitter. Madrid Council said that other cities around the world had also mounted campaigns against man spreading, and Podemos announced that it had tabled a motion in the Madrid Regional Parliament to extend the ban to the capital's metro underground network. Quote, we believe that putting a name to and making visible these kinds of daily sexist behavior that go unnoticed in the way ahead to become more aware, seeing what we use not to see and leaving inequality and machismo behind, said Clara Serra of Podemos in presenting the motion. If that sentence doesn't make any sense, that's because it doesn't make any sense. It's missing a verb at the very least. But Madrid's regional transport chief, Angel Garrido of the Conservative Popular Party, said that there was no need to ban manspreading, as the current rules state that it is one seat per passenger. Madrid is not the first city to intervene in quote-unquote sexist behavior on public transport. 2 years ago, New York, of course, launched a campaign against the prickly issue of manspreading on the city's subway. First posters were put up urging dudes to stop the spread, followed by reported arrests for taking up more than one seat. Authorities in Mexico City took an unusual approach to teaching men a lesson about misogynist behavior in March by installing a penis seat on an underground train. Yes, I covered that in my usual periodic insanity show on my channel. The seat, molded to mimic the bumpy shape of my man's body, was labeled for men only and accompanied by a seat that said, it is annoying to travel this way, but not compared to the sexual violence women suffer in their daily commutes. And quote, helicopters idling in the background. I mean, all of these people should be helicoptered. All of them. Seriously, this is the big issue in Madrid? How about the fact that you're leading a country that is still technically bankrupt and with like 40% unemployment, most of it in the capital city? Maybe that would be a bigger issue. Just saying.
Yeah, and huge levels of youth unemployment and
60% youth unemployment. It's amazingly high. Yeah.
I mean, 60%. That's just so. It's
Only
just
Greece has it higher, which is 65.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine what sort of perspective that is if you're a young person in Spain, just finishing up high school, and you realize that there's, statistically speaking, a 60% chance that you're going to be unemployed. It's amazing.
Yep.
And
probably,
then, and then you have people who seem to think that one of the biggest issues is that men sit with their legs slightly too far apart.
Yep. Well, you don't have people, you have Podemos, which is communists. I mean, communists are not really people. No, because that's the thing. I mean, this article says, oh, the left-wing council. No. Podemos is not just a left-wing party. It's not like, Partido Socialista Obrero Español. Now, that's a left-wing party. They're social democrats. No, Podemos is to the left of Syriza in Greece. And probably to the left of Jeremy Corbyn, too. I mean, they openly embrace they praise the Soviet Union. They're funded by Iran. So they're basically leftist Islamists. I mean, Podemos is really the hardline stupidity. Uh, think of the worst thing you can have in your mind about a leftist, and then think of Podemos, and you will probably be optimistic compared to what comes out of Podemos. So there's that. Uh, where as for the policy itself, give me a fucking break. Uh, Again, Spain has issues in enforcing some more sensible laws, such as maintaining law and order in certain neighborhoods and whatnot, and Madrid in particular. Are you telling me that the city hall and the local police will be busy finding people for spreading their legs in the buses of all the places where it's already hard to enforce things because the buses are crowded? Really? How the hell are you going to enforce this? I mean, this really seems like uh, political masturbation, I guess. I mean, it's for the politicians to feel good. The ideologue, idealistic communists in Podemos, for them to feel good. It's just a jerk off context.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank
I
goodness
mean,
Spain is not. Go ahead, please.
why does the law need to get involved there? If you're sitting next to someone who's sitting with his legs far apart, yeah, I agree that's rude, and it's perfectly reasonable to ask him or her to stop. But I don't know why the government needs to be involved in that.
Yeah,
It's just
most of
insanity.
these things. Yeah, most of these things come out of this mentality that there ought to be a law, and there's got to be a law for everything. It is this never-ending mentality that laws need to govern everything, and if something exists that is not regulated, then that something is definitely not functioning properly because there isn't a law regulating it. This is the mentality of the French political class, and it is the mentality of almost all leftists. If there isn't a law, then it's unregulated, and therefore it's bad. So they want to regulate how you pee, which was actually attempted in Sweden. Regulated how you sit in on the bus seats, which is being attempted in several cities. Now Madrid tries to becomes part of that list. It's this mentality that needs to go. It's this helicopterable mentality, and I don't know how to fix it. Other than to just keep on mocking them and telling them to go fuck themselves. And what I was about to say before is that thank goodness Spain is not the United States. I mean, in New York, they actually arrested people um, for quote unquote man spreading. I mean, that's a police force that's completely out of control. I mean, once you get to that point where you arrest people for how they sit in a subway or a bus, uh, yeah, that's probably the moment when you can actually say police state. I mean, really?
Yeah, it's just hugely disproportionate. I mean, maybe if like the compartment is filled up and there's someone who insists on like taking up two seats, then um, I mean, in such a situation, it should be enough for the sort of public pressure from other people around to get that person to sit more reasonably.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I mean, if that doesn't work, then what are you supposed to do? I'm supposed to like stop the carriage and call the police? Uh,
Yeah, it
is
doesn't
that
sound.
supposed to solve things? I mean, that's just going to create much more much more effort, much more cost than we actually than the problem you're actually solving. It's just completely inefficient.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a disadvantageous trade-off for the taxpayers and for the society at large. I mean, yeah, the perceived benefits, no matter how much you would like to overemphasize the benefits, it would still be minuscule in comparison to the cost. It's basically the Thomas Sowell rule: at what cost compared to what, and what hard evidence do you have? And the same thing. What hard evidence do they have that it's uh, that it is one, a real problem and not really an issue of one or two examples, and two, that it is predominantly a male problem, which I don't think it is. I mean, if I were to be really a dick, I could have started taking pictures inside all the buses and subways in Stockholm that I've been around in the last 9 days, because I've spent half of my time in Sweden as traveling in various communal transportation means, and it's not really an oftenly encountered behavior, and when it is not really overwhelmingly male. But this is the portion that everyone forgets. The people who advocate, who say, "Oh, but women do this crap too," which is true. But both sides seem to be forgetting that this is a very rarely encountered behavior to begin with. It's not really that often. And I say this as someone who's traveled with the subway in almost all capital cities of Europe, and multiple other cities of Europe, or all over Europe, east and west and north and south. And it's not really that very oftenly encountered behavior. It's not really a huge issue. And again, having a strict rule of saying, "Oh my God, any case should be under the incidence of the law." Well, I'm sorry, but there are situations when you're alone in the bus, or there are like three other people in a bus with 40 places. I don't think it really should matter. I mean, if the passengers want to take a nap on three places, they should be left alone. I mean, it's why, again, why, as you have correctly asked, why should the law get involved so deeply in this? It's insane.
Yeah, and that's typically the occasions when you see this kind of quote unquote man spreading or
Absolutely.
bag spreading, as it's actually happens more often. And just people like if there's like two places, people will often just sit on the outermost place and have the innermost place that's just free. That sort of thing happens quite a lot when there's plenty of room,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
that's fine. That's not a problem. And when your bus or the um, metro or whatever subway fills up, then people usually make room, and that's just how it's supposed to work. And usually it works like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen this happening every single day since I arrived in Stockholm, where the subway is in almost all of the lines. Half of the time is 20% full, and then the other half of the time is 100% full. So I usually go up in the subway at when and I'm usually alone in the car, where maybe there are three or four other people, and for the first half of the ride, you'll see a lot of people, uh, maybe not really taking a nap, but definitely spreading a lot. And then when it starts filling up, it kind of makes room. And this is today and yesterday and the day before. I mean, this is what I don't understand. I mean, this is really a storm in a teacup, but they're making it such a huge deal, and it surprises me in a way that they're having success. But on the other hand, it's refreshing to see that it's taken seriously only in very deep left wing places. They're not taken seriously in more reasonable local councils, which is great.
Yeah, and I'm all for feminists focusing on trivial shit like manspreading, if that keeps them away from doing more damage with more serious topics. And of
Yeah.
course, it makes them look ridiculous. It really doesn't help their brand to be associated with the struggle against manspreading.
Mhm. Yeah, because I mean, the ideologues who came up with this and pushed it, maybe they should ask themselves, because in a matter of years, it won't be today, but by 2020 or so, uh, feminism will not only be just a dirty word, which it already is, and that's great, and we can take some of the credit for that, maybe even a minuscule one, but still. Um, but feminism, it won't be just a dirty word. It would also be the word of, "Oh, you're the disdainful cunts rallying about manspreading whilst genital mutilation is increasing." Yeah, yeah, okay, go fuck yourselves. That's gonna happen sooner or later. I mean, it's really interesting to see how uh, once the older ideologues of feminism and the older leftists died and the new leftists took over, whatever intelligence was left it just seems to be has disappeared because they're doing so many own goals. They're scoring so many own goals. It's becoming annoying to play this game anymore.
Yeah, I mean, these new feminists, they're really rebels in search of a cause.
Yeah.
All these sort of issues that they could possibly have already been won by previous generations of feminists, and they have nothing left. So they gravitate to these sorts of nonsense issues like manspreading.
Right. Okay. Incredibly, I mean, I probably got infected. I mean, I was in Sweden and you were in Germany, so Swedish efficiency plus German efficiency. We've been extraordinarily efficient, even though we had a bit long news section, a bit long of a news section. I guess we'll see you again next week on June the 23rd. Hopefully, I'll be in a much better mood. I'll have enough time to get cured of my depression. Because I'm accustomed that when I'm wrapping up the show, it's already dark outside. But I'm recording some of this. Maybe I'll put it on the channel. As you can see, it's still it's as light as it was when I started the show. The sun is still out, and it's just it really is depressing. And I hope by next Friday I'll be less depressed and more able to speak a bit more coherently, and probably with a bit less disdain. I mean, I said helicoptered several times on this show. I usually try to abstain myself from from that, but not this time. I just couldn't do it. I mean, you see what Sweden does to a man, which is why one shouldn't be living in Sweden. So.
Unless one owns a helicopter.
Yeah. I was just talking to a guy the other day. I mean, does Sweden have enough helicopters? Because if you don't, we can help you from the Intermarium, so we can solve this problem with the commies. Because just so too many of them, and too few helicopters for sure. Right.
Renting helicopter business.
Yeah, I'm gonna open a helicopter business, but it will have its tax headquarters in Liechtenstein, not in Sweden, because they're gonna tax my helicopters to death in Sweden.
Yep.
Just saying. And since Sweden is a very pro-EU place, it's not like they're gonna do a Swexit. So I can actually hope to keep it running for enough time to actually make a dent in the amount of communists. Right. With all of that being said, I'm out of really important things to say, but I'm sure Jon still has a few things to say.
Okay, I would invite you to check out my blog, which is at orthogonalideas.com, one word. And I guess we'll see you next week when Lucian will be back in Romania. And until then, I invite you to take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.